Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 7 of Death Parade. And yeah, I'm pretty excited for what's to come. We just got done watching Death Billiards, which was the OVA that was originally the pilot, and people were telling me in the Discord, specifically Truck was explaining that it was the project from a Young Animators Association to basically come together as a group of animators and create a pilot that could eventually possibly be its own series. And Death Billiards was taken with such popularity that it got the green light to go ahead and be its own actual anime. So that's really cool. So it makes me wonder about different elements from Death Billiards, like the picture of the girl and everything with the story that we know, and how that's all going to come together and what we're going to do with that. If that was just a little piece that was quirky, or if they decided to incorporate it and make a whole story out of it and a plot line with the black-haired girl. We don't know, right? We don't know. But aside from that, I was also told by K.A. that Mayu's voice actress from episode 6 is the same voice actress as Anya from Spy Family. And I'm like, look at that! Look at her doing voice acting work back in the day, right? Even though it's not been too long since this series aired, right? Like 2016, 2017. Still, it's cool to see like Anya's voice actress working 6 years ago and then is now in like one of the more popular anime of the year. So that's really cool. I like that a lot. But yeah, it was a nice, Death Billiards was a nice like set halfway point in between. We just got done meeting Ginti and Mayu and Hamada, which was from Miyano Mamoru's character, and getting to know what Ginti's deal is as an arbiter. And then we took a break with Death Billiards. Now we're diving back in with Death Parade with episode 7. So we're at the halfway point. We know lots of things about the lore, about the arbiter's job to pass judgment, that Decim's only been an arbiter for 5 years, but Nona has been here for 82 years. Oculus seems like he's been here since the dawn of time, and he's terrifying. And then you have Castra, who seems like she's kind of in the upper management. There's a whole ladder of management of the arbiters, and maybe you can advance and be promoted from being an arbiter to being like whatever Nona is. We don't know if Nona even passes judgment anymore. And then there's the black-haired girl that Decim spared from judgment because she had remembered her death and she couldn't play the game. But now she's on this contract. We're assuming it's 3 months. But now she's on this like limited contract where it's like, is she going to start remembering things? Is she not? And then what's with the story of the 2 kids? It seems like she's one of the kids. Like she's the little girl in the story, the one that can't hear. But what do we do with that? So I feel like there's a mystery behind her, and there's something that we don't know that's not been said yet, but I don't know exactly. I can't put my finger on it because we don't have enough information. So I'm super excited, y'all, to see what we find out. But real quick, I want to give a special shout out over to Patreon, to our philanthropy tier. These people help every week to not only support me in doing what I love, these reactions, but also to giving me extra contributions to help pay for the manga, the anime, the streaming services, host sites, whatever. So I have 3 tiers over on Patreon. If you want to go check them out, you can. But I want to give a special shout out, as per the Patreon tier for philanthropy tier, to Edgar, to Nameless Monster, to Dana, to Anime Annie, to Tyrone, to Eric, to Sunspots, to Shimoyama, to Be Happy, to Translucent Men, and Alex Cornejo. Thank you all so very much. Your contributions help me to keep this channel and do what I love doing. So I could not thank you enough. All of my love. Thank you guys. I'm really grateful. But with that being said, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive in and see what happens with Ye Old Death Parade, episode 7. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this, y'all. This story's going to have a bittersweet ending, isn't it? I'm not getting happy-feely vibes. I'm not getting warm fuzzies. Nope. I'm getting the vibe that things are not going to end well. I have a very sad ending, and then I have a bittersweet ending, and then I have like a good ending in mind. And I'm not sure what it's going to be, and maybe it's going to be none of them. So I'm about to dive into some theories, so please don't confirm or deconfirm them. Let me wallow in my ignorance until we find out. But And this, of course, whether it's Whiteboard Coon being squeaky, needs some WD-40, or it's my dogs barking at every living animal outside. I was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to stop the reaction, but then I was like, please stop barking. So apologies for that. I hope that was okay. But yeah, so we get a lot of information in this episode. Alcohol poison. Alcohol poison. It's weird. It's alcohol poison instead of alcohol poisoning. Alcohol poisoning is when you have too much alcohol in your system and your body's like, no, we're not having this. But alcohol poison is just like, well, alcohol itself is a poison. So it's kind of like, it's sort of like self-referential. And I feel like that title in itself kind of applies to the idea of the arbiters being dummies, because they're essentially modeled after humans. So basically Oculus is saying that humans are dummies and the arbiters are dummies too. It's funny how that works, right? Oculus is scary. I'm not getting good vibes from Oculus. He's definitely one of those characters that on the surface when you first meet him, you're like, oh, what a fun old man. And then the more you get to know him, you're like, oh, we should be scared of you, right? He does not inspire like happy feelings. He makes me go, oh, you're going to be really creepy down the road. You already kind of are. But the fact that he's playing pool with himself at the very beginning of this episode, the fact that he's just playing billiards by himself and then recites the rules of being an arbiter. So I want to bring Whiteboard Coon out to talk about this. The rules of being an arbiter. So we have an arbiter. Rule number 1. Got going on here with Whiteboard Coon. Rule number 1 is that they cannot quit making judgments. I guess there's a caveat to that though. Everything has a caveat, right? And the caveat to this rule is unless they are transferred to another place, like the Bureau of Information. So unless you go to like another division of arbiter limbo world, you have to keep doing your job. An arbiter cannot quit making judgments. So I guess it's not necessarily that you can't quit ever being an arbiter. It's that as long as you're an arbiter, you have to make judgments in that position. And if you don't want to do that, then you have to transfer to somewhere else. Which at first you'd be like, well, why would they want to lose arbiters? Because they're losing people making the judgments. But then you realize that the Information Bureau, they are putting together the memories to give the arbiters, and there's so many people dying that they're having trouble doing it in time. So they're short-staffed everywhere, and I'm kind of like, why don't they just make more arbiters? But Oculus kind of hints at, God peaced out a while ago. He went on vacation, so don't have anybody making more arbiters. But that does beg the question, right? So we have these questions over here that I don't know if this series is going to answer them or not. They might not, but I'm going to pose them anyway. I'm going to be like, who made Decim and Ginti? Or rather, where are arbiters from? Does Oculus make them? Does Oculus make the arbiters? And he makes Nona and she's like one of his favorites? Is that how this works? Or did Oculus make Decim and Ginti? I don't know. So that there's that question. So we have to think of that. But they cannot quit making judgments, for that's the reason why they exist. And then 2, as he hits the sun, arbiters cannot experience death, for that would bring them close to being human. So, which is rather interesting, right? They can't experience what makes humans human, which is mortality. So arbiters are immortal. And I love that line from Nona later on where she says, they cannot live and they cannot die. They physically cannot die because that would make them too close to being human, but they aren't allowed to live and experience love or things that make them human as well. They have to just sit there and constantly judge and have the people who they judge's memories be erased from them. So we're going to go back to that, right? But arbiters are immortal. They cannot die. They literally, that would make them too close to being human. And if they were too, because the idea of them being of them being not like humans is that their inhumanity is what makes them the neutral party, right? Because if they were human, then humans naturally have a bias. That's just part of being human, and you naturally have an opinion and a bias towards something. But if you're not human, you just look at it through a very objective lens based on the information you gather, and then you just make a judgment. So that's the idea behind the arbiters, is that they just make a judgment, right? Arbiters cannot feel emotions is number 3, for they are dummies. Oh, and so that's the third thing, is that they cannot experience emotions because they are dummies. Okay, I'm gonna need to get a new marker for that one. So yeah, they can't experience emotions because they're dummies. Okay, with the exception that we're gonna put over here of possibly being Ginti and Decim. And we'll talk about Queen right here. So yeah, it's the irony of all ironies that the arbiters are not allowed to feel emotions. But as Nona points out, she's like, we're supposed to be judging humanity, but we can't die ourselves. So we're supposed to judge the darkness within them without understanding where that darkness comes from or anything about it. It's like, on the one hand, yes, you are a neutral third party, but on the other hand, you have no clue what you're judging, and your decisions are based on just what you see without any experience. So we also get to know the idea that we get a couple other little like pointers thrown out to us. And one is that the arbiters lose memories of those judged. Which is really sad, because if he ends up judging the black-haired girl, it means he's going to forget about her. And that makes me very sad. So we're going to talk about that in the 3 possible endings. So that's not good. They judge, they lose memories. But also we find out that the bodies of those judged are dummies when they come there. That makes a lot of sense too, because it's like, and these markers, I'm sorry, are terrible. I'm going to have to switch them after this video. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you're like, how did you come into the bar when you're dead? But it's essentially their soul pops down the elevator and it's put into a dummy to give it a form while they play the game for the purpose of judgment. So that's why this entire time there's never been a risk of someone dying. Like in Death Billiards, when the old man's head gets cracked into the case and everything, that's why the black-haired girl and Decim didn't really worry about it, because they were like, oh, well, it's just a dummy. The soul is just giving it an identity, but it's not really real. It's just the dummies there, which we'll talk about with Decim's hobby that is there. But yeah, so that's fascinating to me, that that makes so much sense now of why Decim and the black-haired girl have not been worried about these people in these games getting injured, and why the guy, when his head got slammed into the arcade game over and over again, was okay, because they were just dummies with a soul inhabiting them, giving them a shape and form. That makes so much more sense now. I'm like, okay, that's great. I totally get that. All right. So then we have the girl, the black-haired girl, who keeps having the same dream. And meanwhile, we go back to Ginti and being like, what happens when you're not able to judge someone? So we have 2 scenarios here, right? We have Ginti. Ginti is not able to judge Mayu. Why? I think Hamada's gone. Why can't he judge her? Because he doesn't want to. So is it like, has he developed feelings for her against all odds? I don't know. Why can't he judge her? What's the deal? And then you have Decim. And Decim, I think he doesn't want to judge the black-haired girl. I'm going to put BHG, because there's no way to judge. he's like, I can't judge her because she doesn't have an opponent. There's nobody that died at the same time. I can't do anything. What's going on? But here's the crazy thing. She remembered that she died. So she had remembered that she died, and that's why he couldn't judge her. And so they erased her memories. And supposedly there's like a 3-month contract before maybe her memories come back or before they have to judge her. I don't know the rules. But she's gained her memories back. So in the reaction, I was like, oh no, she remembered she died. But then I'm like, that's why she wasn't judged in the first place, because she couldn't play the game. She remembered that she was dead. So she's remembered that she's dead, and remembered the mom, but she's not telling Decim because she doesn't want him to know. Because she doesn't want to push on the judgment. That's a sad thing. She likes being there with him, and she knows as soon as he finds out that she's either remembering things or can be judged, that she's got to leave. And it's the worst thing, right? And that does make sense now. Like, the arbiter's life sucks, and it seems so horrible. But you kind of get why they do it. Because if everybody started getting an attachment to these hot arbiters... then no one would want to get judged and no one would leave. And then they'd get bogged down and work wouldn't happen. So it's like, I get why they do it. It's so tragic, right? What's tragic too is the fact that I don't have the food that Ginti and his arbiter friends are eating because it looks freaking amazing. That like bean combo with a fried egg over it or whatever. I also like that we get to see some of the arbiters that they're all like, we've never had problems judging people. And he's like, And the thing of it is too, is that the arbiters that are there are all pretty emotionless. Like Ginti and Decim. Decim seems emotionless, but he's not. We know he has emotions under the surface, right? He just doesn't exactly know how to translate them. And Ginti is just like outwardly emotions everywhere, right? But these other arbiters that they see and he talks to, they don't seem to really have any personality. They're just like, no, we just do judgments. And that's it, right? Quinn seems the closest to having some personality, and so does Nona. And Ginti's just getting frustrated because he can't judge the girl. Meanwhile, the black-haired girl finds the one book amidst all the books of alcohol, Shavat, and realizes that it's a story her mother told her. And she's always had a little streak of white hair. So that begs the question, how did she die? And why is she been able to remember? And what is she going to do with this information? Interesting. So we meet Quinn. She's the other one from the OP. I guess she hasn't lost her eye. She's just got the little thing on there that allows her to like look at the memories. I see now why she made the face comment, because now that you look at Quinn, she has like bags under her eyes. She looks worn out as hell. She looks done. She's just like, I hate my job. She's like, why'd you get me transferred? Why indeed? I kept waiting in this episode for Quinn to make a mistake and for Quinn to do something bad that would warrant her leaving being an arbiter. I was waiting for that to come out, and it doesn't. It's just that Quinn was done. And she's like, I don't want to be an arbiter anymore. So they're like, oh, you don't want to be an arbiter and do the fun things like play games with people? Oh, okay. Then we're going to stick you on an assembly line where you just make mosaics all day, every day for eternity. Cool, right? So yeah, I feel like maybe she's like, thank you, Nona, for getting me this job. I instantly regret. So yeah, alcohol poison. So yeah, the black-haired girl's trying to remember. She remembered that she died. And then but she doesn't do anything about it. And then Decim instead, she's like, she asks him, she says, whose book is this? And he says, well, that I don't know. He's like, well, I do not know. He's like, I don't know where it came from. And she's like, you're not going to be any help at all. So there's 2 copies of the book. Nona has a copy and Decim has a copy. Fascinating. And she almost wants to tell him that she knows, but she doesn't say anything. And he says it's possible that Queen left it here, Quinn. And he says the former arbiter. And then we find out. Now, Clavis, I wonder if Clavis, we haven't seen Clavis's eyes. I wonder if Clavis was an arbiter and then was kind of in the same boat. And he's like, nope, I'm going to run the elevator now. Bye. And didn't want to do that. So they take them to Quin Decim to drop him off, and they note that it's on the 15th and 20th floors. And I think it's funny, now it makes sense that you have Ginti and Decim, and they both have the red eyes and the blue eyes, right? So it makes sense that they both were created at the same time. Interesting. Although, and then when you add the two together, you get purple, which is known as eyes. So I'm like, okay, some color theory maybe going on here. He says, starting tomorrow, you'll be Decim. Now, are they all dummies too that have been implanted with this soul of an arbiter or whatever it is? Is that maybe it? Now, the question she's going to bring up to Quinn is about adding human emotions to an arbiter, right? Interesting. And Nona's in charge of the tower now. And Quinn says, you can have all of my liquor. I'm done being an arbiter. What a relief. And Nona seems kind of like upset with that. She's like, what are you making a big deal about this? Maybe the alcohol poison line too is relating to the fact that Quinn had been there so long she'd poisoned herself as an arbiter and she couldn't do it anymore. Maybe her memories were not being forgotten like it was supposed to. We don't know. I ended up being sent to the Information Bureau. And so she gives each of them the paddle. And I like that it's Death Billiards that we play in this episode. When I get now why they had us watch the Death Billiards OVA, because the rules of the game were explained in the OVA. They are not here because they expect that you already knew them from the OVA. So that's fun. But yeah, I like that they say you guys are going to be arbiters starting tomorrow. And Ginti, what's interesting is that she talks about how she wants, like, Nona says that people should not be judged the same. And on the surface, that seems like you'd want to say, oh, well, don't you want people to be judged the same? Because then there would be a bias and somebody might get, somebody. But that's kind of the situation. Some people are getting Ginti, who judges one way, and some people are getting Decim, who judges another way. So there's automatically a bias there. But I think what she's saying is that what their job is to bring out the darkness of the situation and make a judgment call. But she's saying that not everyone's darkness is equatable. So you can't just do it quantitatively and say, oh, this person is more darkness than another. That's not how you judge. So she says that she wonders if human emotions in an arbiter would make a difference. And what it would do. And it seems like Decim and Ginti were like the experiments on that. Like, did they implant human emotions into Ginti and Decim to see what would happen? Because Ginti presses the button. He draws out the conditions. But Decim does not. And then at the end, and Nona notices he never presses the button. And then we see at the very end that she goes to be reincarnated and he does not. He ends up going to the void. And then she says, off you go. Yep. And then we don't really see what happens between them, but they all have a drink except for Decim has like the whiskey instead of the martinis. And they praise him for being a good bartender. And they say, isn't he suited to take over? She says, why didn't you press it? And he says, oh, I forgot. I was too busy paying attention to them. He's like, he was watching and observing them and learning about them. I was distracted during the game by the two individuals and by what the two of them were thinking. And Ginti's like, humans are idiots. What does it matter? But Ginti says it doesn't matter what they're thinking. We create extreme conditions and get to enjoy how foolish they act. And Decim says, I don't think they're foolish. He says, I have respect for people who live fulfilled lives. And they're like, what is with this one? And Nona's like, oh, she's like, you could be a different kind of arbiter than what we've had. You actually take into account their humanity and you don't just treat them like they're just idiots, right? Like they're the dummies. She's like, this could be interesting. And she gets on to Ginti though too, where she's like, be quiet. And she says, you just lack experience. And she kind of, she explains why the extreme condition is necessary. She's like, you don't have the experience as an arbiter to be able to judge them without drawing out that darkness. That's why I gave you the remote. She's like, you don't have the experience to know as soon as you look at a situation to be like, oh, there's the darkness. That's how I can judge. She's like, that's why we have to bring out the darkness. That's why you have the little buttons that you push to do that. She's like, you can't not use it until you get some more experience, okay? The darkness of the soul takes on many forms. And she says, such as it could be fear of death or craving for life. Whether you take that to be foolish or respect it is up to you. So yeah, so that's kind of the interesting thing is Ginti thinks that human darkness, Ginti thinks it's foolish, but Decim respects it because he's like, that's a sign that they've lived their lives. And so she's like, it's up to you how you judge based off of that. She's like, nobody's going to tell you to do otherwise. You just have to make a judgment call. I think it's best for there to be more than one way to judge people. And that's why we have Decim and Ginti, which is interesting. So I like that they're both the same age. They're both 5 years old. Where they came from, I guess the god of this world made them since they're arbiters. And Quinn says, whatever you do, find something you treasure. It doesn't matter what. And Ginti, at first I was like, okay, well, Ginti has the dolls because he was telling Harada in episode 6 not to touch them. But maybe it's Mayu. I don't know. I don't think you're supposed to latch on to people as treasures. But Ginti has his dolls that he uses. And then Decim has the dummies. And the girl, the one dummy there, it didn't dawn on me at first, but the girl there, the dummy there, she was the one that was with oh my God, I'm trying to think back. She was the one that was with the dad, the man. They were on their honeymoon and he was the father of her child and she was the one convicted of cheating. He recreated her in dummy form. Ha, 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 ha. So yeah, and at first, the black-haired girl clearly forgot about her. The black-haired girl forgot about... Oh, no, she wasn't. Well, I mean, they watched that happen, but she wasn't really in on it, so she probably wouldn't remember it as well because she was, like, watching him more than anything. Oh, okay. Or right. Isn't that right? I think so. Back in the beginning, wasn't that the case that she kind of, like, watched in on from afar? But in any case, at first she doesn't know what to say about it because she's like, I mean, it's not really a hobby. You just make dummies and dress them up. So, like, what do you enjoy about it? And he's like, this. And she's like, that doesn't help me. And so he's like, would you like to see a little more? And she's like, no, I'm good. But then we go back to Quinn and Nona as they're drinking the wine. And she says, you're hard up, aren't you? And she says that humans are dying too quickly. Condensing the memories of the dead is hard work. Yeah, because they make these little, like, weird mosaics out of their memories, and they have to compress them all and make them fit together like puzzles. So, yeah, the idea that creating memories for an arbiter is like an industrial line assembly work is kind of hilarious. She's like, you've never done it. I think people are dying too fast. The pace is 7,000 per hour, 116 per minute, 2 per second. The pace is like, okay, you're dead. Okay, you're dead after all. And we do a half-hearted job as a result. So it's like on all fronts, there's so many people dying that the arbiters are having to like make judgments and move on one after the other and keep forgetting so they can keep doing their job. And then the ones in the investigative bureau, they're like just putting together memories without having a full heart in the job, which makes you wonder if the memories they're putting together are fully formed or not. Like, what if the black-haired girl, what if her memories weren't fully formed and they just like shucked something out there and it wasn't completed? I don't know. That's so interesting. And she asks what the situation there is, and she says it's not great. He's still new at it. He doesn't even have any doubts about judging yet, does he? I'm sure he could be a fascinating arbiter someday. But it's just too much to hope for. Yeah, she's like, he could be a really good arbiter, but I don't know if it's going to work out. implanting human emotions inside an arbiter. And she says 3, arbiters cannot feel emotions for they are dummies. So are we suggesting that Nona kind of went behind the scenes and Nona put these human emotions into Ginti and Decim as like a test run to see what would happen, to see if it was possible that an arbiter could have human emotions? How do you even implant human emotions in them? We don't know. We haven't, well, maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out. Make sure old Flowerhead doesn't find out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she says it's fine. Like, she seems like, Nona seems cautious around Oculus, but not terrified of him. And so they're back to talking about how many guests they get per day. And he's like, our minds are filled with memories of our guests. So they naturally, it could become an obstacle. Your brain gets overwhelmed with too many memories, so they get wiped after a while. He's like, we periodically forget their memories. After judgment, the guests' bodies return to being dummies. Yes, they were dummies from the start, right? And typically are disposed of, but instead I claim them. It's kind of sad, too, the idea that all these dummies that are representative of humans who have passed just get thrown away. Like, you're not going to, like, upcycle those and reuse them to harbor the souls in the future? Like, wouldn't that make more sense? But is that a commentary on, like, wasteful culture? Could be, but that's such a visual though. But now the ED makes more sense, right? That's all the dummies left behind. And he says, people who have lived a full life. I don't like that they end up as though they never were. So yeah, so like, again, Decim respects the dead. So he's made his entire bar like a memorial for them. Being like, I don't like the idea that they live these full lives and yet they're forgotten. So all these people here are people that have lives that have been previously claimed. And I just made them like a memoriam here. And then Nona said, it's an awful pastime, isn't it? But now the black haired girl's like, no, it's not. It's actually like kind of sweet that you can't remember them all. So this is some way to at least immortalize them, even though you yourself are going to forget about them at some point. It's really sad. And so she switches with him so that she can make the dinner for him. And it almost feels like he looks at her and then kind of closes his eyes, but we don't get to see his expression, right? Almost like he's feeling some kind of emotion, but he doesn't know what to do with it. Meanwhile, Mayu, he's like, everything you're doing interferes with my judgments. And she's like, what do you mean interferes? He says, it's because of you that everything's been turned upside down. And she's like, it was like this from the get-go. Why can't you just judge me? Games where you risk your life are crazy anyway. So, like, he's like, because humans are idiots, right? And she's like, it's not that. People generally only look out for themselves. Mm-hmm. He's like, then what's your story? Because you didn't do that. You didn't look out for yourself. You looked out for him. So why are you different? And she's like, I don't get what you're saying. Like, I feel like Ginti has this clear thought that humanity can only be one way, that humans are only out for themselves and they can't be self-sacrificing. So she has like thrown him for a loop, and he almost seems like he wants to understand her better and be like, well, I can't pass judgment on you because there's no darkness in your heart. That's what it is. Oh, Harada had the darkness so he could pass judgment on him. Mayu doesn't have any darkness in her heart. She's just a fangirl. Her death was an accident. So he's like, I can't judge you because there's no darkness to base anything off of. But it's like, yeah, not everybody has darkness inside of them, like enough to make a judgment call, right? And she's like, I don't get what you're getting at. And he's like, why do none of you guys ever understand yourselves? And she's like, oh, never mind. He's like, do you want me to drop you into the void? And she's like, oh, what was the void again? Like, she's like, what are you talking about? You mentioned that before. I love the cat is like getting all up close with her. And he's like, I can't do this. He's like, my cat's butting up with her. I love he tosses the cat and her. It's great. Oh my God. I got a really good screen cap right now, and I'm just going to keep that sucker. Yep. Anyway. And she's like, who do you think I am? And he doesn't know what to do. Meanwhile, they're all drinking the liqueur and everything. And talking about, they're like, lots of people die each day and we have to judge them no matter what. She's like, all of us working mechanically without any skepticism. So yeah, there's no room. She's saying there's no room for error. We just have to keep doing our job. And I wonder if she was harsher with Decim in the beginning because she didn't want him to like screw up and get replaced. But she's like, how are we expected to judge properly when we can't have a bit of skepticism? We forget all about the people that we've judged. Because if we didn't, we couldn't go on being arbiters. We are dummies. We never live and we never die. Which is so, like, the big thing of it is like they're modeled after humans in their appearance. And they, like the humans when they come down to play the games, are dummies that just have a soul inhabiting them. But their difference is they can't die, but they're never allowed to live. They just have to serve this purpose. And it's judging these other beings that they never, the other beings, it's so interesting. The other beings that they're judging are ones who have gone out and lived lives that they can never experience for themselves. So yeah, it is weird that they end up judging them in the first place, right? I'd like to see an arbiter who has human emotions and what their judgments would be. So yeah, Nona's like, we all are basing judgments based on things we don't understand. We're judging humans based on a set of emotions that we can't comprehend. So how is that fair, right? So instead, she's like, I want to see if an arbiter did have human emotions, how would they judge? Because that would give insight to us on what we are doing or not doing right. And then we go back to this like delicious looking ham club that's going on with the pickles. And she asks him to tell stories about the guests, but he doesn't remember any of them. And she's like, then what you're doing is a hobby, because it's a memoriam, but you're also doing it because it's a hobby. And then we see that Decim doesn't quite have like any emotional or social response because he's eating the sandwich. And she's like, you're not going to give me any feedback? Like, it's good? And he's like, it is great. And she's like, oh, come on. He's like, it is terribly delicious. I love it. And so then Nona wakes up and sees Oculus and is freaked out that he's there. And he just happens to show up. She said, I told you not to come here without asking, and don't get so close. He's creepy. Oculus is creepy because he kind of has like this like gaslighting, like Stockholm syndrome vibe to him where he's like, well, you've not been spending any time with me. What's the deal? And it's like, because you're kind of creepy. That's why. And he's like, I want you to come play games with me. And she's like, go ask somebody else. And then he's like, well, are you hiding something from me? And she's like, no. But she is hiding something from him. Whatever the book is tied to. I don't think Oculus knows about the black-haired girl. And I think Nona wants to keep that. I think Nona's put the 3-month contract on there to try to like just let it go and get by. But then they're running out of time, right? And he sees the book Shavat. And she says that she liked it and she wanted it from the real world. I sent for it. And he lets it go. And meanwhile, the black-haired girl is with Shavat. So we get the ED, and the ED makes a lot more sense now. The ED with the mannequins, the idea of humanity and the dummies and the arbiters all kind of being together. It's so interesting because what it sounds like is that it's almost like God created these arbiters, these angels, to pass judgments for him because he was like, I've got way too many judgments. I need some help. I'll make you all to help me judge. But then the irony is that 1, Oculus doesn't think God's around anymore. And 2, the arbiters don't have any emotions. So they're basing judgments just on what they see and not what they understand. So it's fascinating, right? And the ED showing them all as these crumbling dummies amidst this flower is beautiful. Like, it makes so much more sense now, right? Meanwhile, we get Castra. And Castra's whole deal is that she has been, her deal, we find out what she does. She assigns the dead to the arbiters. That's fascinating. She assigns the dead to the arbiters. And so she's like, I'm sorry I'm asking for so much. And she's like, oh, well, you always bring me goodies after all. So she brings her like the lollipops and stuff. And she's like, that one will do. And she says, no, they're both marked. She's like, I'll re-tag them. And she said, I said they'll do. To send to your boy, right? They can't. They have to be sent to a special arbiter. Why? So I guess our guess, if there's certain cases that are special, they have to be sent to special arbiters to like have specific judgments placed upon them. It's interesting. I guess maybe they're like, oh no, these are special cases. Like their memories are too violent or too harsh. They need to be sent to a special arbiter judge because we don't know. We've not had any like murderers sent here. I mean, I guess you could say the husband that drove off a cliff was a murderer, but we've not had any like criminals sent to Decim yet. They've all been just normal people that have had bad circumstances, but we've not had any like criminals or people that have done bad actions like that. So that's interesting. I'm like, okay, what do we do with that? And she agrees to send them over. She's like, Nona, are you feeling pressured? And she's like, yes, there was never much time to begin with. That's all. So basically the black-haired girl, her time there is limited, and maybe that's what she's pressured by. Maybe she's worried about Decim and being found out and what's going to happen with that. Maybe there's something there. Maybe she knows about Ginti and Mayu and is worried about that. We don't exactly know everything that's going on, but we do know, and Huckleberry's like destroyed this toy. We do know that apparently we're on a time clock. Apparently Nona's getting her memories back. Or not Nona, the black-haired girl's getting her memories back slowly. And Decim and Ginti may have a lot more under the surface in terms of them having emotions than we originally thought. So, yeah. This episode left so many questions. Like, we learned things, but it left us with so many questions, and I want answers. Dang it. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait for episode 8. But I am curious to know your thoughts down below, your comments for the episode. I hope you all enjoyed the reaction discussion. Oculus is scary. I've got so many questions and concerns, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, won't we? So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 8 of Death Parade. Bye!